faculty seated on stage to please stand. And finally, would the graduates who are chosen by their dean to represent their school or college by carrying its flag in the academic procession, please stand. Please join.
It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our 2018 Spring Commencement speaker. From Camp Randall Stadium, this is David Muir.
Thank you. I love you too. You know, I came to celebrate your academic achievements, but I also came because the University of Wisconsin-Madison is supposed to be a lot of fun. I'm told I have to wait a little later in the day. Thank you, Trina, for that kind introduction. Thank you to Chancellor Blank. Thank you to the senior class officers for inviting me here to speak. And really, thank you for that stop at Mickey's Dairy Bar today. Sorry if I cut the line. I pulled a little rank with the chancellor. They had a table waiting, and the scrambler, and the pancakes, and the milkshake. But again, I'm going to stay here for a little later. I hear it gets better. It's a privilege to be here with so many of you, the proud parents, the step-parents, the family members, the friends, and of course, it is a true honor for me to be here to celebrate the class of 2018. I know the senior class officers were likely thinking, you know, who should we get this year? It has to be someone with a lot of time on their hands, someone with nothing to talk about lately. There's really nothing going on these days in the news. Let me just say this, though. You will never forget what happened in the world while you were a student here. The election you witnessed, and no matter where you stand, who you voted for, what your passions are, these are historic times we find ourselves in. And you know, the one thing that I learned over the last couple of years of doing the news is that when you get a chance to come to Wisconsin, you come. Y'all are important. You know, in all honesty, I do want to say this. What a time to be going out into this country, out into this world, and we need your energy, your spirit, your smarts more than ever. And I know that there are aspiring journalists. You put them right here in front of me. And I would say to you all sitting here today, and I know they move the schools around from year to year, thank you for the journalism for me. But there's no more important a time than right now to be a journalist, to seek the truth. But I want to tell everybody here in the stadium today that this principle applies to so many disciplines, to so many roles. And just as you have done here as badgers in your classrooms, I want you to continue to ask the tough questions long after you leave this incredible university. I'm fully aware that as I stand up here before you today, before you and your family and your friends, this day is filled with excitement, with wonder, but undoubtedly it is filled with tremendous fear. Admit it. Fear of the unknown, fear of finding that first job, fear over whether it will all work out just exactly as you have it planned. Well, I'm here today, I hope, to encourage you really to embrace the fear. There will be so many moments in your life when you walk through a door and into something unknown, something new, and that sense of fear really will overwhelm you. And I was thinking as I was preparing these remarks over the last couple of weeks of one of my earliest memories of fear, one of those first doorways I had to walk through. And the memory comes from childhood. I was just 4 years old. I remember the school bus coming to pick me up, I kid you not, for the first day of kindergarten. I grew up in upstate New York, and so that bus would travel over the hills and through the winding back roads before arriving at school, and I had plenty of time on that bus to second guess this decision to go to kindergarten. I remember arriving at the school and precisely where that bus came to a halt. I sat in my seat, I did not move, I let everybody else get off the bus. One by one, the students filed off, and there I sat. And the bus driver, she looked at me, and she knew she had on her hands a boy who did not want to go to school. She made a deal with me. She called me up, she said she would walk me to that kindergarten class. She said she'd wait at the door, and if I didn't like it, I could turn around and she would take me home. So we walked down that hallway together, I will never forget it, right to that kindergarten doorway, and I walked into that room. I took about 10 steps in, I looked around me, those little chairs, And then I decided this is definitely not for me. Definitely not. I turned around, I raced back to that door, and I looked down the hallway, and there was no bus driver. I could see her leaving the building. How could she? But you know what? She did exactly what she was supposed to do. She led me up to that door, and the rest of the work was mine. So here we are today, your professors, your coaches, your parents, they've all helped you walk up to that door, and the question right here as we sit, what will you do when you walk through it? As a journalist, as Trina mentioned, I have had the opportunity, the privilege to report from all over the world, and I want to share with you that it's always the children who remind me that the vast majority of people across the globe and across this country share similar hopes and dreams, that we actually have far more in common than what separates us. These are universal hopes. And it was 4 years ago, I was reporting from the Syrian border on the child refugees who had no choice but to leave their country because of the war. Their homes had been bombed, their schools destroyed, their families were really chased out by the violence. They left behind their schools, their playgrounds, their bedrooms, everything they owned, and they were now living in tents with their families. And when the sun came up, I was there to witness as these children woke up and they said goodbye to their parents. It was the children, these child refugees, who were going out to work. Not the parents, because the farmers there would hire the children, they could pay them less. And after 6 or 7 hours in the fields, I watched as the children then skipped across the field on their way to a makeshift school. Imagine that, a 7-hour day picking potatoes in the fields and then a full day of school. And they did it with smiles on their faces. They skipped across that field, they were singing, and I know each of them were just simply hopeful that one day they would get their childhood back. Some of the children I met were orphans. Their parents did not get out of Syria. And I will never forget that those children, there were quite a few of them that would just look up at me and put their arms out. And I would pick them up. And on the wall of the orphanage that I walked through, I'll never forget 2 words that were sketched right into the wall with a little paintbrush. They said, "Love me." I still carry the photos of those children on my iPhone with me every day. I have it right here in front of me. And I know that as I sit here today with all of you a world away, those children all have similar hopes and dreams. It was just a couple of weeks ago, I was back in Beirut for the airstrikes on Syria, and while we were there, I decided I want to go try to find one of these kids that we met so many years ago, one of these refugees. His mother had been a teacher in Syria, his father had been a government worker, and when I met them, he was now fixing tires inside a garage that he had found, and that boy, Rami, was sitting in the garage helping his dad. So years later, this was just a couple of weeks ago, we went out to find him, and we pulled into that garage, and Rami's father looked at us, giant smile. Years later, he remembered us immediately, gave me a hug, and he told me that Rami was out in the soccer fields. So we spent the afternoon driving through Beirut looking for little Rami. Field after field, we were looking. And the sun went down, and finally, we found Rami. He's now 16. And his father told me that their resettlement application had just been approved for New Zealand, and that Rami would Google on his phone at night, New Zealand, just to see images of where he might be one day. So eager, so hopeful that he'll go to school and he'll get a job. And I share with you Rami's story here today and the stories of those children who reached up to me, hoping I would just lift them up into my arms, because I think that it really reminds all of us of what we have in common with people really all over the world, the hope of school, the hope of a life ahead with opportunity. I hear it all the time right here in America. For years, we've been traveling the country, reporting on families, businesses, determined to make things here. The series is Made in America, and we didn't start out by telling people to only buy in America. We all know our economy doesn't work that way. We're in a global economy. But we thought, why not get the conversation started? Have people check a label now and then. It might help a family member, a struggling business owner down the street. So we shot a Made in America here in Madison this morning, and we'll do another one this afternoon before we get on that plane. And what I've heard across the country reminds me that in a nation where there are really so many competing voices right now, that there's actually so much more that we have in common. And I hear from so many proud parents, like the ones who are sitting here. I know moms, dads, stepmoms, stepdads, that just want an opportunity for their children, for all of you sitting before us today. And what I sense as I report in this country is that the young people in this country, your time is here. There is no question. You are the generation who will have your voices heard. I see it in the faces of the young people who are on the news every night. They're taking a stand. They want to make their community safer. They want to make them smarter, more connected, not more divided. And as I've sat here and listened to these speeches already today, after all, isn't that the Wisconsin idea? The idea that there is no border here at the university, that you're a part of the greater community here in Madison, part of the state, part of this country, part of the world. So I firmly believe that one of the great byproducts of this really tumultuous time in our country is a generation sitting right here before me, more engaged than ever. Every night, I do believe that. Every night on the news, I often say I'm lucky enough to have a conversation with America, and it's a true privilege to sort of ask the questions, to call out really the hypocrisy on all sides. But I'm here to say that that's not just my job. That's our job as Americans, to be engaged in the world around us. I just happen to put on that microphone every night. But you know, we live in an age when we all have the power to ask questions. We all have the power to make change. And no matter what you choose to do after you leave this great university, I hope you will remember those kids who reached up to me to pick them up. They didn't have a voice that day, but all of you sitting right here have a voice. You know, we all use our phones to document our own lives, but I'm going to challenge you today, not just to take pictures of yourselves, but to aim your cameras, your phones, on the people in your community, on the victories, the small triumphs. Use your voice to help those who might need a little help with theirs. I brought my phone here in front of me, and I thought I would test this out. I'm going to point my phone on the biggest victory in front of us here today, which is all of you. It's going to be the best Insta story ever. Let me hear what you got. That's the sound of badgers about to change the world. And yes, that's just a tiny warm-up. I'm ready to jump around. But I do want you to remember what I said about fear. I want you to embrace the fear. It's inevitable, and it's a true sign of the excitement of the unknown, the challenge to come. I remember being a kid playing in the backyard. I was the only kid in the neighborhood who would go inside when the news came on to watch Peter Jennings. I'm still a nerd. And it's not lost on me that I now sit in Peter Jennings' chair, and I say that to you today not to pat myself on the back, but to tell you that that chair is waiting for you. There are so many roles out there waiting for you, but there will be fear. On my first night anchoring the national news, my heart was pounding louder than the words coming out of my mouth. But I kept going. I have no idea what I said, but I kept going. And I promise you, you will too. And so I say to you all today, remember the boys and girls, those child refugees who reached up to me with their arms, hoping I would just lift them up. And remember today how much we truly have in common, our hopes and dreams, instead of what sets us apart. And I really refuse to believe that as a country, and your generation in particular, will not stand for the same old divisions. I think you've had enough of that. You are the ones who will take what you've learned here and set out on great new adventures. You will set the examples for the rest of us, and I'm convinced you will conquer your fear. As I started out, for me, it was that kindergarten doorway, the bus driver walking me up to the door and leaving the rest to me. Your parents, your family, your professors, your fellow Badgers right here in this stadium have all helped you to get to that door, to get to this moment. Now it's just time to walk through the doorway. And if you look back behind you when you walk through that door, for me it was that bus driver I saw, but I hope that you'll see every single one of us cheering you on, myself included. I'll be so proud if one day my travels bring me to wherever you might end up, whatever community you begin to call your home, to celebrate whatever you undoubtedly will accomplish. How your choices will better the community you call home, and if by chance our paths happen to cross again, we will celebrate together, the Badger way. And we will celebrate the fear you face down to make it all happen. On Wisconsin. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hit it!